there was a time when nobody knew who Liam Hayes truly was. To the world, he appeared to be just another ordinary man working an unremarkable job in a modest office building. Every morning, he would show up to his 9-to-5 wearing the same worn-out brown jacket, carrying a battered briefcase that looked like it had seen better days. Coworkers barely noticed him, they assumed he was just another cog in the wheel, someone who quietly did his work and blended into the background. Little did they know, Liam was hiding a life that was anything but ordinary. Born into unimaginable wealth, Liam's family owned a global conglomerate that spanned industries from tech to luxury goods. Mansions, private jets, and a name that opened every door in high society were all part of his reality. But Liam wasn't interested in flaunting his riches or basking in the comfort of his privilege. He had grown disillusioned with the fake smiles and shallow conversations that often accompanied his elite lifestyle. Beneath his tailored suits and designer watches, he yearned for something real, genuine connections, authentic relationships, and a love that wasn't tied to his wealth. This quest for authenticity led him to make a drastic decision, to step away from a life of opulence and live as a regular guy. He wanted to see the world from a different perspective and experience life without the cushion of wealth. Most of all, he wanted to find someone who would love him for who he was, not for the size of his bank account. That's how he ended up working as an entry-level employee at a small company, under the management of none other than Helen Brooks. Helen was a woman who had worked hard for everything she had. Raised in a working-class neighborhood, she knew the value of a dollar and the effort it took to earn one. Now in her late 30s, she had clawed her way up the corporate ladder to become the manager of her department. But her success came at a cost. Years of dealing with ungrateful employees, unfair bosses, and cutthroat competition had hardened her demeanor. She was known around the office as tough, no nonsense, and, to put it bluntly, a little grumpy. Helen's colleagues whispered about her behind her back, calling her the dragon because of her sharp tongue and fiery temper. But Liam saw something different. Beneath her tough exterior, he sensed a woman who had been hurt one too many times, someone who had built walls around her heart to protect herself from disappointment. And for reasons he couldn't quite explain, he was drawn to her. From the moment Liam joined the company, he made it his mission to get to know Helen. At first, it was small gestures, offering her coffee during late meetings, staying late to help her with reports, and always greeting her with a warm smile even when she barked orders at him. She dismissed his kindness at first, convinced it was just another ploy from someone trying to curry favor. But Liam's patience was unwavering. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, her icy demeanor began to thaw. As the days turned into weeks, Helen found herself confiding in Liam about things she never shared with anyone else. She told him about her childhood, her struggles, and the loneliness that sometimes crept into her life despite her professional success. Liam listened intently, offering no judgment, just understanding. He never let on that he could solve all her problems with a single swipe of his credit card. For the first time, Helen felt seen, not as a boss, not as a tough woman who had to have all the answers, but as a person. But just as their bond began to grow, cracks started to appear in Liam's carefully constructed facade. One evening, Helen caught a glimpse of an unfamiliar name on a document Liam had accidentally left on his desk. It was the name of a company she recognized, one of the largest conglomerates in the world. The connection made no sense. Why would someone linked to such a powerful company be working as an entry-level employee? Her curiosity piqued, Helen decided to dig a little deeper. That night, she did what anyone would do, she Googled him. What she found left her reeling. Images of Liam at charity galas, standing beside celebrities and dignitaries, flooded her screen. Articles detailed his family's immense wealth and influence. Helen couldn't believe her eyes. The man she thought she knew, the man she had begun to trust, was not who he claimed to be. The next morning, Helen couldn't look at Liam the same way. Her mind raced with questions and doubts. Was everything he did just an act? Had he been playing her all along? Her walls, which had begun to come down, shot back up higher than ever. Liam noticed the change immediately. The warmth in her eyes was gone, replaced by the cold, guarded expression he had worked so hard to melt away. He knew something was wrong, but he didn't know what. As the tension between them grew, Liam realized that the truth was bound to come out. But how could he explain himself without losing her trust forever? Would she understand why he had chosen to hide his identity, or would she see it as yet another betrayal in a world that had already let her down so many times? And so, as the two stood on the brink of a confrontation that could either bring them closer or tear them apart, one question loomed over everything: could a love built on a foundation of hidden truths survive the weight of reality? The answer, as it turned out, was far more complicated than either of them could have imagined. There was a time when nobody knew who Liam Hayes truly was. To the world, he appeared to be just another ordinary man working an unremarkable job in a modest office building. Every morning, he would show up to his 9-to-5 wearing the same worn-out brown jacket, carrying a battered briefcase that looked like it had seen better days. Coworkers barely noticed him; they assumed he was just another cog in the wheel, someone who quietly did his work and blended into the background. Little did they know, Liam was hiding a life that was anything but ordinary. Born into unimaginable wealth, Liam's family owned a global conglomerate that spanned industries from tech to luxury goods. Mansions, private jets, and a name that opened every door in high society were all part of his reality. But Liam wasn't interested in flaunting his riches or basking in the comfort of his privilege. He had grown disillusioned with the fake smiles and shallow conversations that often accompanied his elite lifestyle. Beneath his tailored suits and designer watches, he yearned for something real: genuine connections, authentic relationships, and a love that wasn't tied to his wealth. This quest for authenticity led him to make a drastic decision: to step away from a life of opulence and live as a regular guy. He wanted to see the world from a different perspective and experience life without the cushion of wealth. Most of all, he wanted to find someone who would love him for who he was, not for the size of his bank account. That's how he ended up working as an entry-level employee at a small company, under the management of none other than Helen Brooks. Helen was a woman who had worked hard for everything she had. Raised in a working-class neighborhood, she knew the value of a dollar and the effort it took to earn one. Now in her late 30s, she had clawed her way up the corporate ladder to become the manager of her department. But her success came at a cost. Years of dealing with ungrateful employees, unfair bosses, and cutthroat competition had hardened her demeanor. She was known around the office as tough, no nonsense, and, to put it bluntly, a little grumpy. Helen's colleagues whispered about her behind her back, calling her the dragon because of her sharp tongue and fiery temper. But Liam saw something different. Beneath her tough exterior, he sensed a woman who had been hurt one too many times, someone who had built walls around her heart to protect herself from disappointment. And for reasons he couldn't quite explain, he was drawn to her. From the moment Liam joined the company, he made it his mission to get to know Helen. At first, it was small gestures: offering her coffee during late meetings, staying late to help her with reports, and always greeting her with a warm smile even when she barked orders at him. She dismissed his kindness at first, convinced it was just another ploy from someone trying to curry favor. But Liam's patience was unwavering. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, her icy demeanor began to thaw. As the days turned into weeks, Helen found herself confiding in Liam about things she never shared with anyone else. She told him about her childhood, her struggles, and the loneliness that sometimes crept into her life despite her professional success. Liam listened intently, offering no judgment, just understanding. He never let on that he could solve all her problems with a single swipe of his credit card. For the first time, Helen felt seen, not as a boss, not as a tough woman who had to have all the answers, but as a person. But just as their bond began to grow, cracks started to appear in Liam's carefully constructed facade. One evening, Helen caught a glimpse of an unfamiliar name on a document Liam had accidentally left on his desk. It was the name of a company she recognized, one of the largest conglomerates in the world. The connection made no sense. Why would someone linked to such a powerful company be working as an entry-level employee? Her curiosity piqued, Helen decided to dig a little deeper. That night, she did what anyone would do: she Googled him. What she found left her reeling. Images of Liam at charity galas, standing beside celebrities and dignitaries, flooded her screen. Articles detailed his family's immense wealth and influence. Helen couldn't believe her eyes. The man she thought she knew, the man she had begun to trust, was not who he claimed to be. The next morning, Helen couldn't look at Liam the same way. Her mind raced with questions and doubts. Was everything he did just an act? Had he been playing her all along? Her walls, which had begun to come down, shot back up higher than ever. Liam noticed the change immediately. The warmth in her eyes was gone, replaced by the cold, guarded expression he had worked so hard to melt away. He knew something was wrong, but he didn't know what. As the tension between them grew, Liam realized that the truth was bound to come out. But how could he explain himself without losing her trust forever? Would she understand why he had chosen to hide his identity, or would she see it as yet another betrayal in a world that had already let her down so many times? And so, as the two stood on the brink of a confrontation that could either bring them closer or tear them apart, one question loomed over everything: could a love built on a foundation of hidden truths survive the weight of reality? The answer, as it turned out, was far more complicated than either of them could have imagined. Helen spent the entire weekend trying to piece together what she'd uncovered. Each article she read painted a picture of Liam Hayes as a man of influence, a philanthropist with a reputation for kindness. But it was this very kindness that unsettled her now. She had seen that same demeanor in their office, but was it genuine or part of some elaborate game? The more she thought about it, the more conflicted she became. On Monday morning, Liam arrived early, as he always did. Helen watched him from her office window, noticing the same brown jacket, the same unassuming smile as he greeted the receptionist. She couldn't reconcile the man in front of her with the one in those glossy photos. Finally, summoning all her courage, she decided to confront him. "Liam," she called out as he passed her office. "Could you step inside for a moment?" He hesitated, sensing the seriousness in her tone. Closing the door behind him, Liam met her gaze, his usual warmth tempered with caution. "Is everything all right?" Helen didn't respond immediately. Instead, she pulled up an image on her laptop and turned it to face him. It was a photo of him at a gala, shaking hands with a renowned business tycoon. "Do you want to explain this?" she asked, her voice steady but cold. Liam's expression shifted. For a moment, he seemed genuinely taken aback, as if he hadn't expected her to find out this way. He ran a hand through his hair, searching for the right words. "Helen, I can explain," he began, his voice calm but tinged with urgency. "But it's not as simple as it looks." "Not as simple," she repeated, her skepticism evident. "You've been lying to everyone here. To me. What's the point of all this? Are you studying us? Laughing at us behind our backs?" "No, it's nothing like that," he said quickly, stepping closer. "I came here because I needed a fresh start. To see the world differently. To find people who value me for who I am, not what I have." Helen crossed her arms, her walls firmly in place. "And you didn't think we deserved to know the truth?" "I didn't want my background to affect how people treated me," Liam admitted. "And I certainly didn't want it to affect how you saw me." His words caught her off guard, but she didn't let it show. "You've built this entire relationship on a lie, Liam. How am I supposed to trust anything you say now?" Liam's face fell. He had prepared himself for anger, for disappointment, but hearing those words from Helen stung more than he expected. "I never meant to hurt you," he said softly. "I just wanted a chance to be someone real." For a moment, they stood in silence, the air between them heavy with unspoken feelings. Helen wanted to believe him, to trust the sincerity in his eyes. But the betrayal she felt was too fresh, too raw. Without another word, she turned back to her desk, signaling that the conversation was over. Liam left her office, his heart heavier than it had ever been. He knew he had a long road ahead if he wanted to earn her trust again. But for now, all he could do was wait and hope that time would give him the chance to prove himself. The days following their confrontation were tense and awkward. Helen kept her distance, burying herself in work to avoid any unnecessary interaction with Liam. Meanwhile, Liam found himself increasingly torn. He wanted to respect Helen's space, but every time he saw her passing by with that guarded expression on her face, it felt like another blow to his heart. He hadn't expected this journey of self-discovery to lead him into such a complicated mess. And now, he feared he had ruined the only real connection he had made in years. Around the office, whispers began circulating. People noticed the sudden chill between Helen and Liam, and it didn't take long for rumors to spread. Some speculated they had argued over a project, others claimed it was personal. The truth remained hidden, but the tension was palpable. Even the once friendly office atmosphere seemed to shift under the weight of their unspoken conflict. For Helen, the situation was more than just professional. She had always prided herself on being able to read people, to see through facades. But Liam had slipped past her defenses, and now she felt foolish for letting her guard down. Yet, despite her anger, she couldn't shake the memory of his genuine kindness and the way he had listened to her in a way no one else ever had. It was this internal battle, the clash between her trust issues and the lingering hope that he might be telling the truth, that kept her awake at night. One evening, as Helen stayed late at the office, she found herself scrolling through old emails and messages from Liam. She wanted to find inconsistencies, something to confirm her fears that his entire persona had been a lie. But instead, she found herself rereading his words and noticing the sincerity in them. He hadn't tried to manipulate her or gain her favor. If anything, he had gone out of his way to be helpful without expecting anything in return. It left her more confused than ever. Meanwhile, Liam was dealing with his own challenges. His family had started reaching out, pressuring him to return to his rightful place in their empire. His mother, a sharp and calculating woman, had little patience for his experiment and reminded him of his responsibilities. Playing poor, as she called it, was beneath someone of his status. But Liam resisted, knowing that going back now would only reinforce the very things he had been trying to escape. Still, the weight of their expectations hung heavy on him, and he knew it was only a matter of time before they intervened more aggressively. As Liam struggled to navigate his family's demands, an unexpected ally emerged, his younger sister, Clara. Unlike the rest of their family, Clara understood Liam's need to break away from their world. She had always admired his courage to seek something different, something real. One evening, she called him out of the blue. "Liam," she said, her voice gentle, "I know you're trying to figure things out, but you can't do it alone. If she's important to you, you need to fight for her." Her words struck a chord with Liam. He realized that he couldn't let his fear of rejection stop him from trying to make things right with Helen. But he also knew that words alone wouldn't be enough. He needed to show her who he truly was and why he had chosen this path. The opportunity came sooner than expected. The company was hosting an annual charity event, and attendance was mandatory for all employees. Helen, of course, was tasked with overseeing the arrangements, which only added to her stress. Liam saw this as his chance to bridge the gap between them. He volunteered to help, knowing it might give him a moment to speak with her without the weight of their conflict looming over them. As the event drew closer, Liam threw himself into the preparations, working alongside Helen in a way that felt almost normal again. She was still guarded, but he could see glimpses of the warmth she used to show him. On the night of the event, the office was transformed into a glamorous venue filled with lights, music, and laughter. Helen looked stunning in a simple yet elegant dress, her usual stern demeanor softened by the festive atmosphere. Liam couldn't take his eyes off her. But the evening didn't go as smoothly as planned. As Liam was helping with last-minute arrangements, a familiar face appeared in the crowd. It was his mother, accompanied by a small entourage. She had decided to attend unannounced, and her presence immediately sent a ripple of tension through Liam. Helen noticed his reaction and followed his gaze, her curiosity piqued. When Liam's mother approached him, her tone was as sharp as ever. "Liam, darling, I thought you'd grown tired of playing these little games," she said, her words dripping with condescension. "Surely you've had enough of the charade." Helen, standing a few feet away, overheard the exchange. Her suspicions flared up again, but she forced herself to stay calm. She watched as Liam squared his shoulders and responded firmly, "I'm not playing games, Mother. This is my life, and I'm not going to let you dictate it." The tension between them was palpable, and Helen found herself torn. On one hand, she felt vindicated in her mistrust of Liam. On the other hand, she couldn't ignore the vulnerability in his voice or the courage it took to stand up to someone so intimidating. For the first time, she began to see the cracks in his armor, not as signs of deception, but as evidence of the weight he carried. After his mother left, Liam sought out Helen, determined to clear the air. "I know you heard that," he said quietly, his voice tinged with exhaustion. "And I know you have every reason not to trust me right now. But I need you to understand that everything I've done here has been real. My feelings, my intentions, all of it." Helen looked at him, her emotions swirling in a storm of doubt and reluctant hope. She wanted to believe him, but the walls she had built over the years weren't so easily dismantled. "Liam," she said finally, "you can't expect me to just forget everything. Trust takes time, and right now, I don't know if I can give you that." Her words stung, but Liam nodded. "I understand," he said. "But I'm not going to give up. Not on you, and not on what we could have." The night ended with more questions than answers, leaving both Liam and Helen to grapple with the complexities of their situation. For Liam, the path forward was clear. He had to prove himself, not just with words, but with actions. For Helen, the journey was less certain. Could she let go of her fear and take a chance on someone who had already shaken her trust? Or would her past experiences keep her from seeing the truth in Liam's intentions? As they left the event and returned to their separate lives, one thing was certain: their story was far from over. The conflicts they faced, both internal and external, were only beginning to unfold, and the resolution remained as uncertain as ever. The days following the charity event were a blur of emotions for both Liam and Helen. Helen found herself replaying his words over and over in her mind. There was something disarming about the way he spoke that night, his vulnerability laid bare for her to see. Yet, she couldn't ignore the doubts that still lingered. Trust wasn't something she gave freely, and the stakes felt higher than ever. If she allowed herself to believe in Liam, she risked not only her heart but also her pride. For Liam, the urgency to prove himself grew with each passing day. He threw himself into his work, trying to demonstrate his sincerity through his actions. He helped colleagues with tasks, stayed late to meet deadlines, and even volunteered for projects outside his responsibilities. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake the feeling that Helen was still keeping him at arm's length. One evening, as Helen worked late in her office, she received a message from an unknown number. The text was brief but alarming. "Do you really know who Liam is?" Attached was a link to an article titled "Heir to a Billion-Dollar Empire Disappears." Helen hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to refuse the bait. But curiosity and suspicion got the better of her, and she clicked the link. The article detailed the story of Liam Alexander, the youngest son of one of the wealthiest families in the country. It described how he had walked away from his family's fortune, choosing to live a life far removed from the opulence he had been born into. The story painted a picture of a man searching for purpose, but to Helen, it felt like confirmation of her worst fears. She stared at her computer screen, her mind racing. Had everything about Liam been a lie? The next day, Helen confronted Liam in the hallway. Her voice was low but sharp as she held up her phone. "Is this you?" she demanded. Liam's face fell as he saw the article on her screen. He had known this moment might come, but he wasn't prepared for the look of betrayal in her eyes. "Yes," he admitted, his voice steady. "That's me. But Helen, it's not what you think. I didn't hide this from you to deceive you. I wanted to be seen for who I am, not for the money or the name." Helen's expression hardened. "And you thought pretending to be someone else was the way to do that? Do you have any idea how humiliating this feels? To find out I've been working alongside someone who's been lying to me this whole time." "It wasn't a lie," Liam insisted, his voice rising with desperation. "Everything I've done here has been real. The way I've tried to support you, the way I feel about you, none of that was fake." But Helen wasn't ready to hear it. She turned on her heel and walked away, leaving Liam standing alone in the hallway. The sound of her retreating footsteps echoed in his ears, a painful reminder of how far they had come only to fall apart. In the days that followed, Helen threw herself even more into her work, trying to push thoughts of Liam out of her mind. But it was impossible to ignore him completely. Every time she saw him in the office, her emotions churned, anger, hurt, and an undeniable longing that she couldn't quite suppress. Meanwhile, Liam was determined to find a way to make things right. He began planning something bold, a gesture that would leave no doubt about his intentions. Unbeknownst to Helen, Liam had reached out to Clara for help. He needed someone who could navigate the delicate balance between his past and present, someone who could help him show Helen the truth without overwhelming her. Clara agreed, sensing how much her brother cared for this woman. Together, they devised a plan that would reveal not just who Liam was, but why he had chosen this path. The day of the company's quarterly meeting arrived, and with it came an air of anticipation. Liam had requested a chance to address the team, framing it as an opportunity to share his vision for the company's future. Helen, skeptical but curious, took her seat among her colleagues, her arms crossed as she watched him take the stage. Liam began by thanking everyone for their hard work and dedication. Then, he took a deep breath and looked directly at Helen. "There's something I need to share with all of you," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "When I came here, I wasn't honest about who I am. I was afraid that if people knew the truth, they wouldn't see me for the person I'm trying to be. They'd only see the name, the money, the privilege. But I realize now that hiding my past wasn't fair, to any of you, and especially not to someone I care about deeply." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "My name is Liam Alexander, and I come from a family that built one of the largest corporations in the country. But I walked away from that life because I wanted to create something meaningful on my own. I wanted to be surrounded by people who value hard work and integrity, not just wealth and status." The room was silent, every eye on Liam as he spoke. Helen felt her heart pounding, her emotions a whirlwind of disbelief and something she couldn't quite name. As Liam finished his speech, he turned to her once more. "Helen," he said, his voice breaking slightly, "I know I've hurt you by keeping this from you. But everything I've done here has been to prove that I'm more than the name I was born with. And I hope that someday, you can see that." The tension in the room was almost unbearable as Liam stepped down from the stage. Helen sat frozen, her mind racing with everything she had just heard. Around her, murmurs began to spread among her colleagues, but she barely registered them. All she could think about was the sincerity in Liam's voice and the vulnerability he had shown in front of everyone. But even as her heart softened, her mind remained cautious. Trust wasn't something she could give easily, and the scars of past betrayals still lingered. She needed time to process, to decide whether she could open herself up to the possibility of forgiveness, and to the risk of being hurt again. As the meeting adjourned, Helen slipped out quietly, avoiding Liam's gaze. She needed space, and Liam seemed to understand that. But the look in his eyes as she walked away stayed with her, a silent plea that she couldn't ignore. The path ahead was uncertain, the stakes higher than ever. And as Helen wrestled with her emotions, the question remained, could she take the leap of faith that Liam was asking for, or would fear hold her back? The answers wouldn't come easily, and the journey to resolution was far from over. But one thing was clear, the choices they made in the days to come would change everything. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions for Helen. She couldn't shake the image of Liam standing on that stage, bearing his soul to the entire company. It was a moment of vulnerability she hadn't expected from him, and it left her more conflicted than ever. Part of her wanted to believe him, to trust that his intentions were pure. But the other part, the part that had been hurt before, kept reminding her that trust could easily lead to heartbreak. Liam, for his part, tried to give Helen the space she needed. He avoided unnecessary interactions and kept his distance, though it pained him to see her struggle with the weight of his revelation. He spent his time working tirelessly, pouring his energy into the company as a way to prove himself not just to Helen, but to everyone who doubted him. Yet, there was a nagging feeling in the back of his mind, a sense that he hadn't addressed everything he needed to. Late one evening, as Helen was locking up her office, she noticed an envelope slipped under her door. Her name was written on the front in elegant handwriting. Curious, she picked it up and opened it. Inside was a handwritten note that read, "Meet me at the old cafe on Main Street tomorrow at 7 p.m. There's something you need to know." The note was unsigned, but Helen had a sinking feeling that it wasn't from Liam. Her instincts told her that someone else was trying to meddle in the situation, but she couldn't ignore the possibility that the message might hold some truth. Torn between caution and curiosity, she decided to go. The next evening, Helen arrived at the dimly lit cafe, her heart racing with anticipation. She scanned the room, half expecting to see Liam. Instead, a man in a tailored suit waved her over to a corner booth. He was middle-aged, with sharp features and an air of authority that made it clear he was used to getting what he wanted. "Helen, thank you for coming," he said, extending a hand. "My name is Charles Alexander. I'm Liam's father." Helen froze, her mind racing. Liam had never mentioned his father, and the sudden appearance of this imposing figure only deepened the mystery. She shook his hand reluctantly and took a seat, her guard up. "I'm sure you have questions," Charles began, his tone measured. "I'll get straight to the point. Liam is a good man, but he's idealistic to a fault. Walking away from his responsibilities and pretending to be someone he's not was a mistake. I've let him play out the charade long enough, but it's time for him to come back to where he belongs." Helen bristled at the implication. "With all due respect, Mr. Alexander, Liam is perfectly capable of making his own decisions. He doesn't need you dictating his life." Charles leaned back, a faint smirk on his face. "You're right. Liam is an adult, and he's free to make his own choices. But I wonder, do you really know what you're getting into with him? The life he's left behind isn't something you can simply ignore. It has a way of catching up to you, whether you like it or not." Helen narrowed her eyes, trying to decipher his motives. "What are you trying to say?" Charles slid a folder across the table. "I did some digging," he said casually. "You've worked hard to build your career, and you've overcome incredible odds to get where you are. But aligning yourself with Liam, it could jeopardize everything you've worked for." Helen opened the folder reluctantly. Inside were photographs of her and Liam together, accompanied by headlines speculating about their relationship and questioning her professionalism. Her stomach turned as she realized the potential fallout if these stories were published. It was clear that Charles was prepared to use this information to his advantage. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "What do you have to gain from tearing him down?" Charles's expression softened slightly, though his tone remained firm. "I'm not trying to hurt Liam. I'm trying to protect him, and you. The world he comes from isn't forgiving, Helen. People will scrutinize every move you make, and they won't hesitate to use your past against you." Helen stood up abruptly, clutching the folder. "I don't need your protection, and neither does Liam. Whatever issues you have with him, you need to work them out yourselves. Leave me out of it." She walked out of the cafe, her mind racing. The conversation with Charles had left her shaken, but it also solidified her resolve. She wasn't going to let anyone, not even Liam's father, dictate her decisions. Still, the photos and headlines haunted her. The thought of her reputation being dragged through the mud was almost too much to bear. The next morning, Helen arrived at the office early, determined to confront Liam. She found him in the break room, a cup of coffee in hand and a weary look on his face. He seemed surprised to see her but quickly masked it with a small smile. "Helen," he began, but she cut him off. "We need to talk," she said firmly. "Your father came to see me last night." Liam's face darkened. "What did he say?" "He tried to warn me off," Helen replied, her voice trembling with anger. "He showed me photos, articles, things that could ruin my career. He thinks you should go back to your old life, and he doesn't care who he hurts in the process." Liam set his coffee down, his jaw clenched. "I'm so sorry, Helen. I had no idea he would go this far." "Why didn't you tell me about him?" she demanded. "If I'm going to be a part of your life, I need to know what I'm up against." Liam took a deep breath, his shoulders sagging. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to drag you into this mess. My family, they're complicated. My father has always tried to control me, and when I left, I thought I could finally escape his influence. But it seems I was wrong. Helen studied him for a long moment, her emotions warring within her. She wanted to believe him, to trust that he was being honest with her. But the weight of the situation was overwhelming, and the stakes had never felt higher. I need time to think, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. This is all too much. Liam nodded, his expression filled with regret. Take all the time you need. Just know that I'm not giving up on us. As Helen walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that the situation was spiraling out of control. Charles's warnings echoed in her mind, and for the first time, she began to wonder if she had made a mistake in letting Liam into her life. The road ahead was uncertain, and the choices she made now would determine not only her future but Liam's as well. The next few days were a blur for Helen as she tried to make sense of everything. Charles's warnings haunted her, but so did the sincerity in Liam's eyes when he had vowed not to give up. Torn between her heart and her head, she found herself replaying every interaction she'd had with Liam, searching for clues that might help her decide what to do. It wasn't until she received an urgent message from Liam asking her to meet him that she realized the decision might be made for her. They met at a quiet park, far from the prying eyes of their colleagues and the watchful gaze of Charles. Liam looked more tense than she'd ever seen him, his usually confident demeanor replaced with a nervous energy. He wasted no time getting to the point. Helen, I know you're still processing everything, but I need you to hear me out, he began, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his eyes. I've been trying to handle this on my own, but my father has crossed a line. He's not just threatening you, he's threatening the company. Helen's heart sank. What do you mean? Liam took a deep breath, his hands clenched at his sides. Charles has been quietly buying up shares. He's planning a hostile takeover. If he succeeds, he'll gut the company, sell off the assets, and leave everyone out in the cold. He's doing this to force me back into his world, to make me bend to his will. Helen stared at him, the weight of his words sinking in. The stakes were far higher than she'd imagined. It wasn't just her reputation or their relationship on the line, it was the livelihood of everyone at the company. Why didn't you tell me sooner? She asked, her voice trembling. Because I thought I could handle it, Liam admitted. I didn't want to drag you into this mess. But now, I realize I can't do it alone. I need your help, Helen. Despite the fear and uncertainty swirling inside her, Helen felt a surge of determination. She had worked too hard to let Charles destroy everything she and her team had built. If Liam was willing to fight, so was she. Together, they devised a plan to expose Charles's schemes. Liam reached out to trusted allies in the business world, while Helen used her connections to gather evidence of Charles's unethical practices. It was a risky move, but they knew it was their only chance to save the company. The day of the shareholder meeting arrived, and tension hung heavy in the air. Charles was there, his smug confidence a stark contrast to the unease rippling through the room. He had no idea what was coming. As the meeting began, Liam stood up and addressed the shareholders. He spoke with a passion and conviction that left no doubt about his commitment to the company and its people. Then, to everyone's surprise, Helen stepped forward and presented the evidence they had gathered. Documents, emails, and witness statements painted a damning picture of Charles's true intentions. The room erupted in chaos as the shareholders demanded answers. Charles tried to deny everything, but the evidence was irrefutable. In a final, desperate attempt to regain control, he turned to Liam. You think you've won? Charles sneered. You'll never escape who you are, Liam. You're just like me. Liam met his father's gaze, his voice calm but firm. You're wrong. I'm nothing like you. And I never will be. The vote was unanimous. Charles's shares were revoked, and he was removed from the board. As security escorted him out of the building, he shot one last venomous look at Liam and Helen. But for the first time, his power over them was gone. As the meeting adjourned, the room buzzed with relief and optimism. Liam and Helen found a quiet corner, their emotions a mix of exhaustion and triumph. "We did it," Helen said, a smile breaking through her tired expression. Liam nodded, his eyes filled with gratitude. "We did it together." But just as they began to relax, an unexpected twist unfolded. One of the shareholders approached them, an older woman with a sharp, knowing smile. "You handled that beautifully," she said. "But you should know, Charles wasn't acting alone. There's someone else pulling the strings. Someone who won't stop until they get what they want." Helen and Liam exchanged a worried glance. Just when they thought the nightmare was over, a new threat emerged, promising to test their strength and resolve once again. The revelation from the shareholder left Helen and Liam shaken. The victory they had fought so hard for suddenly felt precarious, like standing on the edge of a cliff with another storm brewing. They thanked the woman for her warning, and as she walked away, Liam turned to Helen, his expression grim. "We can't let our guard down," he said. "If someone else is involved, we need to find out who they are and what they're planning." Helen nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. "We'll handle it, just like we handled Charles. We've come too far to let anyone take this away from us." Over the next few weeks, Helen and Liam worked tirelessly to uncover the identity of the mysterious figure behind Charles's schemes. They combed through records, reached out to allies, and followed every lead, no matter how small. It was exhausting work, but their determination never wavered. The bond between them grew stronger, forged by their shared purpose and the challenges they had overcome together. Meanwhile, the company began to recover. With Charles out of the picture, morale improved, and the team rallied around Helen and Liam's leadership. Projects that had been stalled were revived, and new opportunities began to emerge. For the first time in a long time, the future looked bright. Then, one evening, Liam received a phone call that changed everything. The caller was a private investigator he had hired to look into Charles's dealings. The man on the other end of the line sounded excited, almost triumphant. "I found something," he said. "Meet me tomorrow morning. You're going to want to see this." The next day, Liam and Helen met the investigator at a quiet cafe. He handed them a thick envelope filled with documents and photographs. As they sifted through the contents, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The mysterious figure pulling the strings was none other than a rival businessman who had been trying to acquire their company for years. He had used Charles as a pawn, feeding him false promises and financial incentives to destabilize the company from within. With this information, Helen and Liam knew they had the upper hand. They decided to confront the rival directly, arranging a meeting under the pretense of discussing a potential partnership. The man, confident in his deception, agreed without hesitation. The meeting took place in a sleek, modern office building. The rival greeted them with a smug smile, but his confidence quickly turned to shock as Liam and Helen laid out the evidence they had gathered. They presented every piece of proof, from emails to financial transactions, leaving no room for denial. "You underestimated us," Helen said, her voice steady and resolute. "But this ends now." Faced with the undeniable truth, the rival had no choice but to back down. He agreed to cease all attempts to interfere with the company and signed a legally binding agreement to that effect. As Liam and Helen left the office, they felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The fight was finally over. In the weeks that followed, life began to settle into a new normal. The company flourished under Helen and Liam's leadership, and their partnership proved to be a powerful force for positive change. Employees who had once been wary of Liam now saw him as a dedicated and capable leader, while Helen earned widespread respect for her resilience and integrity. As for Helen and Liam, their personal relationship blossomed alongside their professional success. They supported each other through the challenges they faced, finding strength in their shared experiences and mutual respect. Over time, their connection deepened into something neither of them had expected but both had come to cherish. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony of Helen's apartment, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, Liam turned to her with a thoughtful expression. "You know," he said, "if someone had told me a year ago that pretending to be poor would lead me here, I wouldn't have believed them." Helen laughed, a genuine, joyful sound that warmed his heart. "Life has a funny way of surprising us," she replied. "But I'm glad it did." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, reflecting on everything they had been through. The journey had been far from easy, but it had brought them to a place of strength, understanding, and hope. As the night wore on, Liam took Helen's hand in his gaze steady and filled with sincerity. "No matter what challenges come our way, I know we can face them together," he said. Helen squeezed his hand, her own eyes shining with determination. "Together," she agreed. And with that, their story found its resolution, not in a grand, dramatic moment, but in the quiet assurance of a partnership built on trust, resilience, and love. It was a new beginning, one that promised a future filled with endless possibilities and the unshakable belief that, no matter what, they would always find a way forward. As days turned into weeks, the company thrived under the leadership of Helen and Liam. Employees who once worked in fear and uncertainty now walked into the office with a renewed sense of purpose. The workplace culture transformed into one of collaboration and mutual respect, a stark contrast to the toxic environment that Charles had fostered. Liam dedicated himself to understanding every aspect of the company, using his knowledge and resources to implement changes that not only improved operations but also created new opportunities for growth. His experience as a millionaire businessman was invaluable, but he remained humble, listening to Helen's advice and valuing her expertise. Together, they made decisions that benefited not just the company but also its employees and clients. Helen, meanwhile, found herself inspired by Liam's unwavering commitment. She had always been a strong and determined leader, but Liam's presence brought out a new level of confidence in her. She began taking risks she wouldn't have considered before, pushing for innovative ideas that positioned the company as a leader in its industry. The partnership between Helen and Liam became the backbone of the company's success, and their employees often remarked on how well they complemented each other. Outside of work, Liam and Helen continued to grow closer. They spent evenings sharing stories about their lives, discovering shared interests, and learning from their differences. Liam opened up about his childhood, his complicated relationship with his father, and the pressure he had felt to live up to unrealistic expectations. Helen, in turn, shared her own struggles, her journey as a woman in a male-dominated industry, the sacrifices she had made to get where she was, and her determination to prove herself to those who doubted her. One weekend, Liam surprised Helen with a trip to a small, picturesque town he had visited during his time away from his father's influence. The town was known for its serene landscapes and welcoming community, and it quickly became a special place for the two of them. They spent the weekend hiking, exploring local shops, and enjoying quiet moments by the lake. It was during this trip that Helen realized just how deeply she cared for Liam, not just as a partner in business, but as someone who had become an integral part of her life. As their relationship deepened, Helen and Liam faced one final challenge. Rumors began circulating in the industry about their personal relationship, with some competitors trying to use it as a way to discredit their leadership. The whispers grew louder, and soon, a reporter approached them, seeking confirmation of the rumors. Helen and Liam knew they had to address the situation head-on. Instead of denying their relationship or allowing it to be used against them, they decided to be transparent. In an exclusive interview, they shared their story, how they had met, the challenges they had faced, and the strong partnership they had built both professionally and personally. They emphasized the importance of trust, respect, and collaboration in their success and made it clear that their relationship had only strengthened their ability to lead the company effectively. The interview was met with overwhelming support. Employees, clients, and even industry competitors praised their honesty and applauded their resilience. The rumors quickly died down, replaced by admiration for the way they had handled the situation. It was a turning point that solidified their positions as leaders and partners. Years later, as Helen and Liam looked back on their journey, they marveled at how far they had come. The company they had saved together had grown into a thriving enterprise, recognized for its innovation and integrity. Their relationship had weathered every storm, becoming a source of strength and joy for both of them. On a quiet evening, sitting on the same balcony where they had once promised to face the future together, Liam turned to Helen with a smile. "Do you ever think about how it all started?" he asked. Helen laughed, the sound full of warmth and nostalgia. "All the time," she said. "If someone had told me that hiring a grumpy, mysterious man pretending to be poor would lead to all of this, I wouldn't have believed them." Liam chuckled, his eyes shining with affection. "Life has a funny way of surprising us," he said. "But I wouldn't change a thing." As they sat there, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, they knew their journey was far from over. Challenges would come, and new opportunities would arise, but they were ready to face it all, together. As Helen and Liam reflected on their journey, they both felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the success they had achieved, but for the lessons they had learned and the bond they had formed. Their partnership, born out of an unusual circumstance, had grown into something far greater than either of them could have imagined. Months turned into years, and the company continued to flourish. They expanded into new markets, launched innovative projects, and built a reputation for being a company that valued people as much as profits. Employees were proud to work there, knowing they were part of something meaningful. Outside of work, Helen and Liam's relationship remained a cornerstone of their lives. They supported each other through challenges, celebrated each other's achievements, and found joy in the little moments, quiet dinners, long walks, and shared dreams of the future. Their love story became a testament to the idea that even the most unexpected beginnings could lead to something extraordinary. One evening, as they prepared to host a charity gala benefiting underprivileged communities, Liam took a moment to look around the bustling venue. The event was a reflection of everything they had worked for, a chance to give back, to inspire others, and to make a difference. Helen joined him, her hands slipping into his as she surveyed the room with a smile. "We've come a long way," she said softly. Liam nodded, his eyes filled with pride and affection. "And we're just getting started." The gala was a resounding success, raising funds that would transform countless lives. As Helen and Liam stood on the stage, thanking their guests for their generosity, they couldn't help but feel a profound sense of fulfillment. Their journey had been filled with twists and turns, but every step had led them to this moment, a moment where they could see the impact of their hard work and know it had all been worth it. In the end, Helen and Liam's story wasn't just about overcoming challenges or achieving success. It was a story about resilience, trust, and the power of human connection. It was a reminder that sometimes, the most unlikely paths could lead to the most beautiful destinations. As the lights dimmed and the evening came to a close, Helen and Liam walked hand in hand, ready to face whatever the future held, together.